The topic for the discussion is Airgap Security. Is it a viable strategy for modern day security? So for those who do not know about Airgap, it's basically having two systems, having your systems that is not internet facing and the other one that is internet facing, right? So basically you want to have a gap between the secure system and the insecure system. There's a layer of air, right? So they don't talk to one another. Now, is this really a viable strategy, right? This is what the panel here will be discussing. We have 20 minutes to discuss that. So let's start with the first. I have 5 questions to ask. Let's start the first question. Is on current relevance. How commonly is Airgap security used in today's cybersecurity landscape, particularly in industries like defense, finance, and critical infrastructure? Anyone care to answer that? Maybe I call upon the last speaker. Sorry, Rahim. Right, so the question is, how commonly is Airgap security used in today's cybersecurity landscape, especially in industries like defense, finance, and critical infrastructure? I believe you're from Singapore, right?
Yeah, I'm from Singapore.
Yeah, so Singapore in the past have what we call the network segmentation.
Yeah. It's pretty common for like utilities, even financial institutions to protect their data, right? They actually use Airgap environment. Personally, to me, if my customer tell me that they are fully Airgap, I don't believe. Especially in nowadays, right, where in the modern world, you need to have analytics, you need to have real-time data. So all this data have to be go up to the cloud for analytics, right? It's still pretty common, but there's a lot more security controls that we need to put in besides the Airgap environment.
Right, so the idea here is, Airgap, although in the past sort of protect your internet-facing systems and the secure systems, right? Today, is it really a myth that Rahim shared that, due to the data analytics, the data science that we need to get from the analytics of the systems, it's kind of difficult to have Airgap, right? Anyone else care to share? Maybe Carol?
Right,
Caroline,
thank you. I mean, it's definitely still in practice, especially if you look at military critical infrastructure. So we talk about network isolation, right? So certain assets that you need to protect, like for example, my husband used to be in Air Force. So in Europe, not going to say which country. And it's very common in the sense that even if you're having a USB for those segmented network, right? If you're going to go from one tier of the system and use a USB to plug into a system 2, like drive, you need to go through a test to actually validate your USB is clean. So of course, it's still in practice. And for example, in business like M&A, so there's a lot of confidential information at stake, right? And these days, cryptocurrency as well. Now, once again, you have your passwords and all that. Are you going to save it there? Digitally, no, so it's offline. And if you're going to do, to ensure that your passwords are safe, in that scenario, probably you think about Airgap situation in that case as well. So of course, it's still being practiced, but the question is, what's the value of it? So it's really up for the organizations to think about it.
So the question is, what is the value of it, right? So that leads to the question, what are the main advantages of implementing Airgap security in the organization?
Yeah, so definitely implementing that Airgap strategy reduce your risk because number one, you are not connected to the internet. So network-based attacks are 0, but definitely it's not 100%. Okay, so there comes that insider threats. Yeah, so air gapping is not 100%. Maybe yes, it's one of the toughest security defense that we can employ, but it's not 100% effective.
So Airgap is not 100% effective, though there's some advantages like what you shared. Anyone else care to share?
I just wanted to say that we saw the example of the Stuxnet attack, which the Natanz site was supposed to be air-gapped, right? And the attack was still successful. So there's no 100% security, but it's definitely making it much harder for the attackers.
Yeah. Okay. So he shared about the Stuxnet attack, right? If you all read about the Stuxnet attack, it's actually an attack via the USB, right, where the USB was actually inserted into the port, right? So, for some of us in the critical information infrastructure, you may face this question about network isolation, like what Caroline said, right, or what I call network segmentation. So there are certain advantages of implementing Airgap, but what are the challenges? What are the risks associated with insider threats and physical security breaches in Airgap systems? So what are the potential risks that you see, right, in Airgap systems?
Maybe I'll go first.
Yeah.
So one of the main things about Airgap is the operational costs involved, right? So it's a very huge operational cost. And of course, from a process perspective, it gets on everyone's nerve, right? Because when you transfer from a non-Airgap system to an Airgap system, there's so many processes that you have to do in order to ensure security throughout. And of course, we've seen, as you mentioned, Stuxnet, proof that you can bypass it with insider threats or by compromising someone on the inside and in leading them into compromising systems as well, right? It could be non-malicious, right? The guy didn't know. He just plugged it in, and unfortunately, that was the Stuxnet virus that caused their plans to go down. So the idea here is it's a balance, like mentioned, between the operational costs and what the organization is trying to achieve, right? With Airgap systems, is it really needed? And if you want to get that data from internal to external, there are methods like one-way traffic, data diodes, and all of that to kind of achieve that. But again, it's a cost versus convenience kind of a conversation, I would say.
So it's the cost versus convenience, and there's definitely solution out there, like what he pointed out. Han Yam pointed out. I think your last name is Lau, right? Yeah. That's what we talk about. Yeah, Han Yam pointed out. There's definitely solutions out there, like he pointed out about data diode, right? You can get data diode from Waterfall, right? You can also get data diode from ST Electronics, which is produced in Singapore, right?
And
so yes, go ahead, Caroline.
To add to that, right, because we come from a human nature perspective. We talk about people, technology, processes. And I think by just thinking about the idea of Airgap, right, people can get complacent, thinking it's safe. Because Airgap, right, what could go wrong? But the devil lies in the details. So if we don't look at the processes and really make it fail-proof, like the USB component, right, it's the processes, the guidelines that should be in place but wasn't in place. So the risk is also being complacent about it.
Yeah, right. No, some people think that, oh, my computer is already Airgap, so I don't have to worry about it, right?
Yeah, maybe just a quick note. As your security definitely initially goes up in an Airgap scenario, I would also say that with your security system being disconnected as well, there's a clear risk that, let's say, your antivirus and other components will be out of date more often than not, right? Because it is now a manual process to update those. Will create tremendous overhead, and you're always going to be behind. So there is, combined with the complacency, there's definitely an increased risk that we might be overlooking.
Okay, thank you. And so we learned about the relevancy of Airgap. We talk about the advantages of Airgapping your systems, but the challenges of Airgapping your systems as well. But let's look at the practicality and scalability of it, right? How can organization balance the need for real-time data access, right, with the security provided by Airgap systems? So you have Airgap systems, but I still need real-time, right? How do you actually balance that need?
Maybe I can go, right? Whatever we do, we should of course assess the risk first, right? In your environment. Yeah. What kind of crown jewels that you want to protect? What kind of the data that you want to protect? Because without this visibility, without this context, you also don't know what to protect. Yeah. Then once you have this visibility, right? You know, like the CSF framework. So we identify, okay? Then we protect, we detect. Then of course we have the other two R's, which I won't be talking about. But after you have identified the crown jewels, the data that you want to protect, then we look at how to protect this data, these systems, right? And what kind of processes or what kind of solutions that can help you. Of course, again, like what you talk about PPT, right? People, technology, and process. Without process, you buy, you invest in different kinds of technology also, it's no point. Yeah, so we need to make sure that we know the crown jewels, the system that you need to protect. We need to have certain processes to protect these systems. Okay, then that's the start of how you can build your governance, your framework.
Right. So it's back to the fundamentals of having visibility of what you're trying to protect. You know, the assets, the critical assets, the crown jewels that you need to protect. Right. So it's important for us to have that visibility. Right. Then I'm going to get the last question to every one of you. Right. Regarding the future prospects, how should organizations prepare for potential changes in the effectiveness of air-gap security as cyber threats evolve? So as cyber threats landscape changes, right? How do organizations prepare for these potential changes, right? To make their air-gap system more effective?
Yeah. For me, based on my presentation, start with the basics. Employ the basics, and no matter how the evolving threats, you have the basics.
Right. So start with the basics. Look at the evolving threats, like what we learned earlier in the first panel discussion. Learn to walk before you run. Right.
I like the basics, and I'll raise it with a connection to my earlier comment, where I think you need to take a close look at the security tools that you will implement and make sure that those are ready to actually cope with the offline situation. So meaning your antivirus infrastructure, your testing mechanisms, your validation, all of this needs to run in air-gapped as well.
Right. So your tools, your processes of testing mechanism, right, Caroline?
Well, as technology evolves over time, we have to relook at the intent of why we still have air-gap, right? Because we talk about constantly evaluating our tech stack. Are they still valid? Is the use case still valid as well? Because there might be another solution for what we are looking for, but we are implying and actually executing air-gap for the sake of it. Then that's a wrong case, right? So it's a constant evaluation of the intent, what fits our purpose out there in the market, and to evolve along with it.
Right. So important of the fit for purpose. You know, what is the intent of you air-gapping the systems? Are you doing it just for the sake of doing it? You're doing it just because you are part of CIIs, right? You really need to understand the intent of doing it. Right. Next.
I would say visibility as well, right? So not just on your own systems, but also the supply chain of it. So air-gap systems does have indeed like a level of protection because of the air between the network systems like you described. But if you need to replace parts, right, we've seen that supply chain can be compromised in between, right, the physical supply chain, and the parts can be changed out as well. So the visibility throughout the whole life cycle of not just your system controls, but also your physical part of it as well is also important.
So yeah, thanks for raising that. I think a lot of us miss the physical part of the air-gap systems, right? The last one?
So business is digitally transforming, right? And that's where you heard about this IoT and such. To fully air-gap, I don't think is scalable now, is viable. So we need to find a way, like with solutions, processes, right, to mitigate the loopholes. Like, of course, we still need air-gap, right? But for those that's not to be intended to be air-gap, you need to find certain processes. Like, for example, we talk about zero trust framework. I'm a big fan of zero trust architecture. Yeah, so how we can actually align the zero trust architecture together with the air-gap controls that you have. Yeah.
Right, so aligning some of the processes, some of the technology to the concept of air gaps, right? Right. We thanks the panel for that interesting discussion, but I'd like to throw the floor back to the people here. Any one of you have worked in the air gap industry? Any one of you have worked in the air gap industry? So basically, in the air gap industry, in my view, you are carrying two computers, one for the internet facing and one for the non-internet facing. Have you all done that before? Especially those in the military. No PMP people? No military people here? Or you don't care about air gap? Nothing is air gap now, right? Because you are You are not in the air gap generation. Any question from the floor? We have another 5 minutes. Maybe I should ask Professor then. Rickson. Don't change my view. Huh?
Now, Prof, you owe me 2 glasses of whiskey.
I can give you a bottle.
So I think the question now is, when you talk about air gap, that's applicable to specific technology. But when we now work towards the emerging technologies, would air gap be still the strategy that you would recommend? Although this has been tested, like, all throughout, but what approach or security strategy would you look at with the emerging technologies coming in? So IoT, all these autonomous devices, even the exponential technologies. So what do you think would be, what would you recommend companies now to look into as a strategy for cyber defense?
Anyone? I have my own views, but
like what I mentioned recently just now, zero trust. Yeah, just zero trust.
Just zero trust technology?
Yeah, so generally speaking, I would say technologies that you have to air gap are intended to be in a secured environment, right? So they, most of the time, you're not intended to kind of breach the gap. And if you want to, it's mainly to run analytics, like you said, as part of your, maybe your larger conversation around operational effectiveness and things. But again, it's also the layer of, like you said, zero trust, how you protect that data is coming out as well. Because when you, let's say, don't have network segmentation and all of that, then there's different ways of getting to that data too. So like with AI, the whole intent of AI is consume as much data as possible to be able to then derive outcomes. So it's a consideration, do I want the air gap data going into emerging tech like AI itself is kind of the #1 consideration, I would say.
So totally agreement with the views of my panelists. And that's the intention of, with air gap itself, right? The emerging technologies, there's an element of uncertainty. And the use case of air gap is really what we say, the real secure environment itself that we need it. So if you're thinking about military and the use case, once again, the best way is like, think about the use case for it. Is it really necessary? If it is, and you check all the boxes, all the stakeholders are aligned, then you know what? It's better to be there, put it there first, unless technology, emerging technology prove otherwise, right? That it's actually safe to utilize it. For example, with AI, could they actually predict certain attack patterns that could help you to prevent, right? So if AI is able to do all that automated response to keep us safe and try and test it until we reach that stage, if not, it's really hard to put something that you want offline into online.
Yeah, I'm absolutely agreeing to that point. I don't think air gap is dead. I think there can be some air gapped environments that you could replace with zero trust and emerging technologies. On the other hand, I would also challenge that if AI is built to keep us safe, there's going to be an AI that will be built to behave in a way that AI cannot detect it, right? So it's a cat and mouse game, and it has always been. And I don't think there is going to be a point where we have security all figured out. So I think we need to continue going back to the basics. Air gap will continue to be a thing in certain environments, for sure.
Yeah, definitely, because I think the only thing that can beat air gap is really unplugging your devices, your environment from the power socket. So yeah, so air gap will still be there. So maybe in a few years' time, there will be a really proven technology. But until then, yes, let's employ air gap for the meantime.
Okay, so I have my own views because I used to work in a system integrator that serviced the defense industry in Singapore, right? So we talk about data diode, right? So data diode is one technology that you can use in air gap systems because it allows data to go one way and not the other way, right? Some people will be wondering what is data diode. Again, come to my class, you will know more about data diode, right? So data diode has been around for a long time, right? It started with waterfall, producing data diode. And Singapore actually, what they do, ST, what they do is, because Airgap system is very important, ST actually built our own data diode. So Singapore built our own data diode just for our Ministry of Defense and some of our critical information infrastructure, right? And you talk about technologies. Actually, there's a technology out there that can be used for dual system. If you look on the internet today, do a search for a device called black computer. BLACK, black computer. It is actually a device that allows two operating systems. It has a chip that is sitting on top of the motherboard that allows you to have two systems, one internet facing and one non-internet facing. The technology is there. It's called the black computer. I know because I sell black computer in the past. All right? So again, thank you very much. I hope you have a nice time today. All right? Thank you.